What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Off the Bench on the 4th of July. Pat, how is your Independence Day? I know this is a very themed Let's Go America type of show. We have so many 4th of July topics. In fact, looking at our show sheet, we have 0. So we're going to reference the fact that this is the 4th of July and then have a very normal show. But how's your 4th of July?
World War champs, baby.
Let's go, baby. I wanted to do the America Fuck Yeah song off the top, but I also need to avoid copyright in general, so I didn't want to risk it. But I was either going to do that or like Hulk Hogan's theme song, I Am a Real American. I think that would have been a good way to kick things off. But hey, we are just going to do a normal intro so that I don't get attacked by the powers that be.
By the YouTube police.
I don't need that happening. I mean, this isn't on my main channel, but it really doesn't matter. Pat, first things first. Look, it is the 4th of July. I guess I will reference a 4th of July topic. Shout out Joey Chestnut. We originally had the hot dog eating contest canceled today due to lightning, and he said, we are doing this thing. He got everyone back. He got everyone on board to start it back up at, I believe it was 2 o'clock Eastern. And then, as he does every year, smoked everybody by about 20 dogs to the second closest guy. So shout out.
I wasn't following it in real time. Like, I kind of saw it after the fact because I saw it was like canceled. And then I saw like, oh, Joey Chestnut eats 62 hot dogs. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And I saw the video where he's like, no, we're doing this. We're doing this.
Well, I will say I was really confused because I understand why, you wouldn't do it like tomorrow or something because it's just not, I guess, important enough. But like, this is something that everyone, including Joey, is training basically all year for. Like, he's doing other eating contests and stuff, but like, this is the one. This is the spotlight. So I was confused that they were just like, oh, it's there's lightning, we're not doing it at all, even though the weather was projected to clear up like shortly after. So I'm glad Joey kind of took a stranglehold of it and said, fuck
and they
that.
could also just like do this inside. Like, I get it's the whole like Coney Island, like it's the whole appeal of it is kind of, it's just like it's goofiness, but like maybe you just could have moved it inside. I feel like they
have the backup option at least. Like, I'm guessing that they probably didn't have an indoor option like lined up, but like you should have one lined up, like
I bet they
some convention center nearby or something where you can just all you really need is a place long enough to have all those tables of them next to each other and then for some of the fans to come in. But I don't know, whatever. Thanks to Joey for getting that going. But Pat, the biggest thing that's happened over the past week or so, obviously NBA free agency kicking off, so we're going to talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to get into the home run derby and NFC East fantasy football preview, and then something that may go over just horrifically, but I'm excited to see how it goes, a sports movies draft. Full disclosure, neither Pat nor I are movie critics, aficionados. We haven't even seen a lot of sports movies. I like to think I've seen now most of like the iconic ones at least once, but some of them were a long time ago. Some of them I haven't seen at all. Pat has already admitted to me off camera that he'll be pandering, just going with some picks that he knows are just popular movies. So I'm gonna try and stick to just my favorite ones, and I got a couple of curveballs for you guys here and there. But Pat, first things first, NBA free agency. I just wanted to talk a little bit of the biggest winners and losers. I hate to say this, Pat, but to me, the biggest winner was the Los Angeles Lakers. Let me pull up their exact moves, but I just remember seeing everybody that they've signed. It was like they've really retooled this supporting cast around LeBron in an ever-closing championship window, let's be honest. Coming off getting swept by the Nuggets, it was abundantly clear that their depth was just not where it needed to be. I mean, they plucked Tristan Thompson off the ESPN set to come play for a game or two, and it's just now they brought in, Taurean Prince, Gabe Vincent. They re-signed Austin Reeves. I know they had some other notable Jackson Hayes, Cam Reddish, brought back Hachimura. So I think that combination
brought back D'Angelo Russell.
For sure. And so all these guys, like, they have good depth now. Like, they have an actual second unit that is not going to make you completely want to vomit. I mean, look, it's the Lakers. We know how they tend to build these second units, whether they are successful or not. It is always just kind of a mishmash of role players that you've kind of heard of and have had, peaks and valleys in their careers. And that's what all these guys are: Prince, Vincent, Hayes, Reddish, and obviously the guys that they brought back. But I think it is a much more competitive cast than what they put together last season.
Yeah, they were really the only obvious winner to me in terms of a team here. They brought back everybody they needed to bring back. They went out and got Gabe Vincent, who's going to be, as we saw in the postseason, could be a really nice piece. And then basically Reddish and Prince and Hayes, those are guys where it's Cam Reddish is going to have nights where he's dropping 20, and then he's going to have nights where he looks like he belongs in the G League, and but that's okay. they've built up a team here. I don't know if this truly makes them one of the top contenders in the West. Obviously, they'll be in the mix, but does this put them ahead of the curve? I mean, I think it just depends on how LeBron and AD can stay healthy, but at least they've done what they needed to do to set themselves up to have a shot.
For sure. And then for my biggest loser, to me, Pat, it was just the Toronto Raptors. They kind of put themselves in purgatory here. They lose Fred VanVleet, who, to me, heart and soul of the team, whether you think he's their best player or not. Probably not. It's probably still Pascal Siakam in terms of overall skill set and what have you. But losing Fred VanVleet for a team that did not perform very well this past year and is not, replacing VanVleet with any notable piece, it seems like they're caught in that ever dangerous middle ground of they're not going to be competitive, but they'll be too good for, a top 5 or so pick that they need to rebuild. Been some rumblings that Pascal Siakam may be on the move, which would make a lot of sense. I feel like that could be something that, could happen over the next few weeks or months before the season comes. But in general, it's a tough time out here for the Raptors. I don't love what's going on for them.
They really should have sold at the deadline. They could have traded VanVleet. They could have traded Siakam. I mean, there was a lot of demand for OG Anunoby. Like, he was one of the bigger names. And not only did they not sell, like, they went and traded for Jakob Poeltl for a first-round pick. And then I basically think they felt obligated to re-sign him. They're like, we gave up a first-round pick for this guy. We got to sign him. I think it was 4 for $80. Like, that's hefty. That's hefty.
Yeah.
And that actually segues perfectly into my winner, role players. Because, besides Kyrie Irving, there were no stars out here. It could have been James Harden, but, we know his deal now. But there were no stars in this. So you're seeing guys who were very solid players, VanVleet being one of them, getting the money that he's getting. I actually like the move for Houston a lot. Like, they've got a really young team of a lot of these kind of high variance players, and he's really gonna, focus things. I like that, but
they were an AAU team before VanVleet, and now it's like they at
that's
least
what I'm
have
saying.
some
Like guys like
steady
Jalen Green,
person.
Amen Thompson, Jabari Smith. Like, he's like the perfect guy. It's just, again, they had to spend the money to get to the salary floor, which is nuts. But
I feel like VanVleet's just the team dad, basically.
Yeah, and then, I mentioned Poeltl, and obviously, like Chris Middleton and Draymond Green, give them all the money they want. Those are very focal guys in their respective teams. And then the big one that's just made me scratch my head is Jeremy Grant. And that also segues into my next point, that the loser is the Trailblazers.
Oh,
whether it be about free agency or what resulted later in the second day a free agency. Like, you go and sign Jeremy Grant. Jeremy Grant, fine player, good defender, good offensive player, not great. I feel like his ceiling is fringe all-star. To give him the kind of money, to give him $160 million over 5 years, he's 30. He is 30. And you'd think they did that with the intention of bringing back Dame. Because, you'd think Dame would want him. Only for Dame to say that he finally wants out, it's like that alone, we talked about that weeks ago, that we thought they should have moved on from Dame. And I think this is going to benefit them in the end. But, what are they going to do with Jeremy Grant now on this expensive aging guy on a young team, again, with Scoot Henderson, with Anthony Simons, with Shaden Sharp, with whoever they get for Lillard? It's just like, and to counter that, they really didn't do anything else. That he was their only guaranteed signing. That is not great.
The Blazers have managed to be pretty mediocre for most of Dame Lillard's tenure there, and they are now kind of backing themselves into a corner where they're going to be mediocre after he leaves as well. They have seemed like they're not. The report is that they're planning to not be terrible this year, regardless of if they get rid of Lillard or not. So looking to get a decent package back for him. To me, again, that's just where it's going to put you into purgatory, because anybody you get back for Lillard is not going to fill out that roster enough to be a playoff team, or at least a team that's even worth, trying in the playoffs. Obviously, we've seen the Heat this past year as an 8 seed make some noise, and I guess maybe that's going to be the, what they preach to this Blazers team, however it looks by the start of next season. Like, hey, they were basically a team that got written off, and, you can make noise as an 8 seed, apparently, if you have the right intangibles. But I just don't see this roster coming together like that. And Dame Lillard, I guess we'll just move on there, Pat. Dame Lillard finally, I'm so happy that he finally has abandoned this stupid loyalty thing that he's been going. All the memes have been so funny forever where it's just like, oh yes, keep giving me your hardest battles. Like I love the grind. It's like, bruh, just leave. Like that's the meme where he's like talking to God or whatever it is. Yeah. And he's finally heading out. He is a weird cat though, man. Dame Lillard's a weird guy because he's saying like he doesn't necessarily want to go to a super team. So, obviously not a team like the Suns, not that they could afford him anyway, but he doesn't want to go to a super team. He just wants to go to a team that's good enough where he can compete. And there's a lot of teams out there like that. I've seen a lot of teams mentioned, including, the Nets, the Heat, the 76ers, the Celtics, even the Pelicans.
I've heard the Knicks.
Yep, sure. And I mean, most of these teams are going to be linked until something a little more concrete comes. All we know right now is that Dame wants the Heat. We know that much. I mean, shocker that's the kind of team he wants to go to, a team that has very much embraced the grind. And supposedly the Heat have said, you can basically have anybody that's not Jimmy or Bam Adebayo from our team and just take your pick, which makes sense given the guys that they have.
In a clear opening at point guard, too, obviously Kyle Lowry would probably go back in the deal just to offset some salary and obviously getting rid of Gabe Vincent. So there's a clear need for a point guard for a floor general like him.
Yeah, and I do think the Heat are probably the best fit in my eyes. I mean, you look at a team that just did make all that noise in the playoffs, obviously getting to the finals, losing in 5 to the Nuggets. Hell yeah. But they did all that without Tyler Hero, who is expected to probably be the centerpiece of the deal, right? I mean, he's a good young player. That's the exact kind of guy you would want a deal like that centered around. So for the Heat, it's kind of just a complete upgrade because they're going to get actual, production, period, from a spot that they are sending back and prove that they didn't need in the playoffs. You get Dame Lillard, put him alongside Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, I think you are cooking. You look at the pieces that could possibly go back. It would be Hero, and it would probably be, I don't know, I guess Caleb Martin. It would need to be something to sweeten this deal enough beyond Hero. So you think Hero, Martin, maybe Lowry, and then draft picks. And I don't know if that gets it done, but I think the fit there at the very least is probably the best and most obvious one for Dame Lillard. They need a guy that can be a secondary leader alongside Jimmy Butler and more so be a guy that can, I think, stretch the floor consistently. We saw the Heat have so much success when they were able to rain in threes with Duncan Robinson and Max Strus and Gabe Vincent, and then as soon as their shot kind of goes cold, it's like, can't really do a whole lot.
Dame is low-key like a top 2 shooting point guard ever.
Yes,
probably the best shooter off the dribble in NBA history.
Yeah,
like,
Dame's not going to go cold.
I think is Kyrie is really in that conversation. Is probably better. Yeah. Well, besides Steph, of course,
Of course.
He's in a league of his own.
He's
besides Steph, it's the two of those guys. So, yeah, he would fit in really well. They're losing Max Strus, losing Vincent. But I don't. It seems the Blazers don't really want Hero, and I don't really blame them. Like, Hero's a solid guy, but Is he a headliner? No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
It brings up, it's a good question of which headliner would they get, though, from another team. It's like you look at
it's true.
The Nets. I mean, I don't know what the Nets have been so far the most other heavily rumored team. I don't know what they get from the Nets that's worth it in their eyes.
Yeah. The thing that I would really imagine with the Nets is that they got so many draft picks from Durant. Like, they could have viewed in that Durant trade, they could have viewed it as like, okay, let's tank. We got all these picks and let's build up from the ground up. Or they can say, hey, let's turn this around quick and let's send some of those picks. Send a guy like Cam Thomas, and that would be the perfect opportunity to get Ben Simmons out of there. Because, again, you're going to need to offset some salary.
Ben Simmons,
and multiple first-round picks. Like, they have the pieces to do that. And I think it'd be a great fit. Spencer Dinwiddie is a very serviceable is the word I'd use, a serviceable starting point guard. Dame clears. And, you've got Cameron Johnson. You've got Mikal Bridges is a budding star. He's turned into, he's turned from a 3-and-D guy into, he was the best player on that team. And then Nick Claxton is one of the better young defenders in the league. Like, they've got a position where they can at least be, a playoff team, hunting for the 6-5 seed at least. But, yeah, I've seen the Knicks, too, which just makes no sense, from the whole Jalen, they've got Jalen Brunson, who's younger. Not as good, but younger and very, very good. But those are really the two teams that I could really imagine him going to right now would be the Heat. I just think the Sixers don't have what it takes. They would need a third team.
Yeah, the problem if you're Dame and wanting to go to a team where you can contend is wherever you're going is going to be giving up a good amount. And it's like, unless the Blazers decide they're satisfied with getting a haul of draft picks and maybe, a sort of role player or young player or two, that team that Dame goes to is going to get semi-gutted to where I don't know that whatever that roster looks like is going to be better than, sort of the best Blazers rosters that we've seen put out over the years. And none of those rosters have done a whole lot in the playoffs. So I don't know. I'll be curious to see where he ends up. There's a lot of teams in the mix. Like I said, the Pelicans have been talked about. I mean, look, maybe you get Zion in the mix here. Who knows?
It would it would have to be. Like you said, what's the best headliner they can get? It's Zion.
Yeah, a guy that's already had some rumblings of them wanting to move on from him. We heard that before the draft. And Zion, I don't know how many strippers he's going to find in Portland, but it's probably less than New Orleans if I had to guess. So it could be a better place for him. But the Dame saga is just beginning. The news just being that it's finally begun after years of us being like, dude, Portland is not the place. I hope he can find a place and compete. I want to see Damian Lillard on a big-time playoff stage. He deserves that, and I think that will be appointment television because he is a clutch player like that. As long as he can avoid facing my Denver Nuggets in those playoffs, I will be perfectly happy. So we'll see how that all plays out. Pat, we'll actually switch over to baseball a little bit, which we never do. But look, this is very important to you and I, which is why I wanted to bring it up. I think we mentioned it a couple of shows ago, but guys, fantasy football season is approaching, and I'm sure you're sitting there thinking, well, you just said baseball. Why are you talking about fantasy football? Our fantasy football draft, our league that Pat and I have played in for 12 years, is determining our draft order this season via MLB Home Run Derby. We're all going to fill out brackets, and whoever's bracket is the best gets their first priority of draft picks. So, I mean, if you win, you can pick the 12th pick if you want, but, so on and so forth from 1 through 12. And Pat, this field's loaded. I'm really excited. I did not expect. I was worried about doing Home Run Derby as a draft order thing in concept because I thought a lot of our brackets would end up similar. I figured there would be, obvious favorites, and maybe there is, and I just don't agree. But look, when I remember when Julio Rodriguez first got announced, it was like, okay, he's playing in Seattle. He was the runner-up last year. It's like everyone's going to pick Julio to win, and I was getting a little nervous. Then the stars are coming out for the Home Run Derby. It's also such a nice reminder of how different this is from the dunk contest where stars just refuse to do it. The stars want to do the Home Run Derby for the most part because one, it's an objective thing. There's no subjectivity to judging and getting screwed like poor Aaron Gordon. But these guys just want to go and hit some bombs. I mean, the field right now: Julio Rodriguez, Vlad Guerrero Jr., Mookie Betts, Randy Arozarena, Pete Alonso, and Adley Rutschman. We've still got 2 guys left to go. I mean, so far the only name for a Home Run Derby is Adley Rutschman. The rest of these guys, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
But here's
it's still
the
an
thing:
exciting
is that
player to see.
Exactly. I would rather have an exciting player who's only got 10 home runs than just like Billy Butler. Like Billy Butler did a couple of home run derbies back in the day. Like that's what I'm saying. Like I'd rather have a guy like Rutschman who's not this brute power hitter, but. That's fine. Like that's what the home run derby is the most exciting part of All-Star Week. And you want to see the best young players in the game on display. And I mean, we've got close to it now. If they could somehow pull in Ronald Acuna, that would be unbelievable. Or even like a guy, like you look at the guys on the All-Star team, like Juan Soto would be a great pick as well if he wanted to do it. But the fact that you've gotten these 6 out of this All-Star field so far. Like you think Rodriguez is the favorite. I think in the whole league, like Aaron Judge is probably the best power hitter. But if you look at it, a guy who can just go up there and just mash taters over and over again, I think you give me Pete Alonso over anybody. Like this guy, he just mashes the ball. And he has been the lone bright spot in just a miserable Mets season. And we've seen it year after year when he's at the Derby. The dude just rakes. Dude,
he's a psychopath. Like, you've seen him in between rounds and even during rounds. He's, like, bobbing his head. He's, like, in the zone. Like, he is all in on these derbies, man. I have never taken anything in my life as seriously as Pete Alonso takes the home run derby, and that's saying a lot. Last year, though, did get upset by Julio Rodriguez. It was 31-23 in the second round, so a little surprising. But, again, like having these guys both back in the Derby is super exciting. Last year, Pat, you remember, obviously Albert Pujols was in it and made a hell of a run. Knocked off Kyle Schwarber.
Amazing.
knocked off Kyle Schwarber in the first round, and I believe it was it was a swing off, and then in the second round nearly beat Juan Soto. Soto ended up besting him 16-15. So Albert Pujols making a run. I wonder if we'll see another sort of Twilight legacy guy. I mean, I don't know what Miguel Cabrera's up to, but that could
Miguel
also just be
Cabrera
painful,
has not hit home runs consistently in like half a decade.
I
just wouldn't be. I mean, the guy's got 500 homers, so I guess it can't be a bad pick. But like,
it wouldn't be up to the
I
level
wonder
of
if they.
Pujols.
I'd wonder if they'd pull a guy like Schwarber, who's obviously not on the All-Star team. But I mean, I don't see why he wouldn't want to do that. Go have a little fun, and again, he's another one of the guys. Like, if you've got to give me a guy to just go out there and just hit home runs and nothing else, it's him.
A lot of good names you could get here. You could get the Shohei Ohtani, maybe redemption. He was a 1 seed in the Derby 2 years ago. Ended up losing in the first round to Juan Soto. I mean, it was 31-28, so I can't really blame the guy. Yeah. But you could get an Ohtani redemption. I don't know what Corbin Carroll's status is health-wise, but he's from Seattle, so that would be cool.
And he's a starting outfielder on the All-Star team as well.
Yeah, so he's having an incredible year. I know he was banged up, but if he could end up being in it, that would be cool. There are a lot of guys that could fill this out. That would be super exciting. But Pat, as we start to think about what we're going to do for our brackets, do you have a guy in your mind that is your pick or your favorite so far out of these six?
Definitely. Like I said, definitely Pete Alonso would be my favorite. I would have to see how the bracket would shake out, have to see who the next two guys are. But yeah, I just think from the perspective of that, this guy is just going to go out there and crush the ball.
I think so as well. It's like the field was already looking so good, and then it was like, yeah, Pete Alonso's gonna be. I was like, oh my god, like he wasn't even on my mind for some reason. I guess I just had thought he was done with it because he's done it so many times. But once I saw him get announced, I was like, this field is ridiculous. My guy right now, I don't know if I'm gonna stick by it, but when I heard him get announced, I was like, he could just crush it. Randy Arozarena.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like he's built for this. As soon as he got announced, he was practicing for the home run derby in BP. He had one of the coaches like timing him up and just trying to see how many he could hit. And he hit a bunch. I think it was like 18 in whatever amount of time it was, which is not bad for a first round of the Derby. He's the guy that I'm looking at, as far as, I think this got to be his first time, right? First timers in the Derby.
It's his first time as an All-Star as well.
Yeah. So if I'm looking at guys who are a little new to the fold, I feel like he's going to put on quite a show because he is just, you want to talk about electric. Like there's a few players that you would put in the category of truly electric rather than just great or good. Like Arozarena, the way he plays is just electric. He's an incredible player.
And it's funny just because like until this year I've kind of just viewed him as one of the more overrated guys in the league. He had that great playoff run, and he's this freak athlete who's got these great intangibles but's never really put it together for a full season. But he's playing really, really well this year. He's the best player on one of the best teams in the league. So But again, he's exactly the kind of guy you want to see in a home run derby. He may not be the best home run hitter, but that is exactly what I want to see.
100%. So we'll see how this plays out, or who fills out that field, I should say. And then I'm just very much looking forward to this derby. I believe it is 6 days away, right?
Monday.
So by the time we do our next show, we will know who won the derby. And guys, we will let you know what not what our draft picks are, because we probably won't know. People take a long time like deciding, but we'll know roughly what our picks are going to be like around, because it tends to end up falling the way that it's lined up more.
And it's funny though, because this is the year where I think I've cared the least about where I draft.
Yes, I 100%
feel
agree.
Like it's such a crapshoot. Like there's going to be guys going in the late first that you might take in the early first. So like, there's really nothing to say. And I feel like too is that I'm just going to be in so many fucking leagues that I'm probably going to be picking from 1 through 12.
Yeah,
anyway,
exactly.
So it's like I'm going to need to be prepared for anything.
Exactly. But that's our baseball talk for the month, I think. We don't tend to talk too much baseball on here. When the playoffs get here, that'll probably change.
Yeah,
but for now, there's only so much we can do here in an hour and a half. But look, Home Run Derby is one of my favorite events of the year, so I had no choice but to mention it. And, of course, with it having fantasy football implications, it was going to get touched on here. So we'll keep you guys posted into how all that lands next week. But, Pat, it is time to continue our weekly fantasy football preview. We're going division by division, and now we've got the NFC East pretty chock full of some good fantasy players. I mean, look, there's a couple teams here that are not a couple. I guess the Commanders are just kind of dog shit, but they've also had spots where they've produced, fantasy relevant guys because their offense isn't always terrible. But we're going to start with the team that is not even remotely terrible. It's the Philadelphia Eagles. And of course, we'll start at quarterback here. Jalen Hurts. Look, there's an argument to be made that he could be the QB1 because of how much he runs the ball. I wouldn't hate you for it. The ADP on underdog for both these guys, for Patrick Mahomes and for Jalen Hurts is 21.2 to 25.3. So Hurts is only 4 spots behind Mahomes, and I think that's totally viable with how much Jalen runs the ball. I don't blame you if you want Jalen Hurts. I think he's as safe of a pick as you can get with that receiving core and the rushing upside. He is just a
great
dynamite
offensive
player.
line as well.
Great offensive line. The only question mark with the Philadelphia Eagles as a whole, and it's just something I like to keep my eye on because, look, coaching changes seem to catch us by surprise when the season starts. Things start to go wrong and you start to hear about, oh, well, yeah, they got a new guy leading. Okay, the Eagles do have a new offensive coordinator this year. Most Eagle fans and most football fans don't expect that to change too much. It is now going to be Brian Johnson, the former quarterbacks coach. He's going to be the new offensive coordinator. So, look, I'm not worried necessarily, but it's just something to remember. If you really want to reduce all levels of variability and volatility on your team, it's just something to keep in mind. I think Jalen Hurts is a guy who's probably least likely to be hurt by something like this. It would be more of a running back or receiver type of thing. If Johnson wants to do something a little different than was done under Shane Steichen, I don't know, but that's not really the expectation. The expectation is basically that he's going to be steering the same
I'm not worried
ship.
about it in the slightest, especially because of the fact that, again, like you have the offensive coordinator, but it's Nick Sirianni's team, and Nick Sirianni's the first offensive mind in line there. So I don't expect too much of a change, and very similar personnel all around too. So not worried in the slightest.
Right, and we will get into the Commanders in a few minutes, but it is interesting because head coach Nick Sirianni, obviously, is going to be his system, but some head coaches are a little more hands-off, like Ron Rivera. So we'll talk about that when we get to the Commanders, but for now, we'll stick with the Eagles, who are employing a new group of running backs this year. We've talked a little bit about them already because of the value that they may, provide in your draft. DeAndre Swift is RB23. Rashad Penny is RB38. I think DeAndre Swift has maybe one of the higher ceilings as far as the guys drafted around this range. If you're in a PPR league, I think RB23, you're probably stealing him. I mean, looking at the guys who are, just ahead of him, it's guys who I don't believe are as talented. You've got Cam Akers, Dameon Pierce, Miles Sanders, Alexander Madison. I'd probably reach for Swift over those guys in a PPR league. Non-PPR, I don't know, probably not, but
probably
non-PPR is also sort of extinct, so we're just the dinosaurs here. But Pat, where do you land on these two running backs right now? How are you feeling about these guys?
I don't know if I'm necessarily in on either of them. You look at a guy like Swift, who, again, a lot of PPR upside, and I don't think we've seen his ceiling because just Dan Campbell just, quite frankly, didn't want to use him very much. He wanted a kind of ground and pound guy, and I feel like we're in a similar situation now where Rashad Penny's more of a traditional early down back. But I think Penny's, outcomes are so far, we've seen the guy be electric, absolutely electric. Even last week he had that huge 3-touchdown game before his knee exploded. And then, can you hear me?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can hear you.
Okay, because you froze. I didn't know if I froze.
Oh, no. I probably, there's been hailstorms. I don't know. Denver weather's hell. But no, I can hear you.
Well, as I was saying, back to where, we've seen him be really, really good. Really good in Seattle, even last year, right before it happened. But I think he could also not make the team. Like, I think there's also a real reality where, like, he just gets cut or only has, only plays in a handful of games for them. But I think Penny and the value, especially in a standard league, or if you're going 0 RB, I think Penny's one of the good guys there because you want to look for volume, and I think he's going to have at least a decent amount of volume and more of the red zone opportunities as well, the goal line opportunities. But again, I'm just not particularly excited about either of them, especially with Jalen Hurts, who is the biggest threat to steal goal line touchdowns out of any quarterback in the entire league.
Yeah, what I will say is and look, maybe he does get cut, and once we get into true fantasy draft territory, the ADP difference will make sense. But as we sit here right now and we assume both these guys are on the roster come week 1, I don't understand the 15 spot difference between Swift and Penny. I think you are getting extremely way more value with Penny than you are with Swift. And I already think you're getting decent value with Swift, given the talent level. But these guys I feel like should be a little closer together, given that, they have differing skill sets and you're getting a piece of a absolutely well-oiled machine of an offense. So I think Penny is as good of a player as you can get around that ADP. I mean, he's near guys who, look, you said it, the biggest question mark about Penny is probably roster, his stability, his spot on the roster, period. But you look at these other guys who have so many bigger question marks being drafted around him. Damian Harris above him at RB37. I mean, James Cook could just be dominant touch-wise there. Who knows? And Josh Allen has similar, risk of taking so much of the rushing himself. I mean, Samaje Perine's above him. A.J. Dillon's above him. Devon Achane is right behind him. Khalil Herbert's right behind. I like Penny a little more than, a good chunk of those guys. So I think he's a good way to get a piece of that offense if you don't have any other sort of pieces already.
And again, like I said, in an ideal world, too, he's not a guy that's factoring into your starting lineup.
Exactly.
So, at that point, you're kind of just looking for, you're looking for guys that have, a reasonable floor but also high upside. And I think Rashad Penny is that, as long as he stays on the field. Is he the biggest health question mark in the entire league? I think so. Off the top of my head, I can't think of somebody.
Here's the funny thing. He very well may be, but also at RB38, you're looking at a guy who is a DeAndre Swift injury away from being top 15. I mean, yes, you will still have the running quarterback, and of course you'll have Boston Scott, who will take on a bigger role than and Kenneth Gainwell, who will take on a bigger role.
Penny doesn't seem like much of a pass catcher.
No, but you would think the touches will skew a little more toward him if DeAndre Swift gets hurt. So I just think that's a very interesting way to look at it when you're down deep in the trenches of RB38.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it makes a lot of sense to pick a guy like him. Let me just look at something real quick. Yeah, I think it's funny the Eagles just completely rotated their top backs, but they're still just employing Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott. Yeah, Boston Scott, man, I don't know what he has on them Eagles. He's a good player, but God, he's
the giant killer.
He seems like a guy, doesn't he, who should be a journeyman, and he's just not. The Eagles are just holding you tight. You're not going anywhere. When we play the Giants, you're going to smoke them.
He's also a guy I could easily see being caught. I feel like he's got to be him and Penny would be the first to go, because obviously Swift is more of a dynamic back, and Gainwell serves his purpose as this smaller third down back. But as opposed to those two, are kind of similar.
Exactly. And then wide receiver-wise, we've got A.J. Brown, who is currently wide receiver 6 on Underdog Fantasy, and Devonta Smith, who is wide receiver 13. Very reminiscent of, sort of the Chase Higgins rankings, where, Jamar Chase, wide receiver 2, and then T. Higgins, wide receiver 14. Both these guys, T. Higgins and Devonta Smith, wide receiver 2s who are incredibly overqualified to be in that role on their own team. Two guys who I think A.J. Brown being at the back end of this top tier, or I guess maybe second tier of receivers, depending on how you want to split it up. I love him way more than I love the guys behind him. CeeDee Lamb, Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams. I think A.J. Brown is the tier break for me. However you want to split them up. I think between him and then you go down to Lamb and Wilson and Adams, I think he's the tier break, and he's a guy who I'm just, perfectly happy being my wide receiver 1. And if I don't get him, I'm okay with getting Devonta Smith at some point.
Well, that's the thing, too. I've said it. Like I said, I wouldn't love the possibility of T. Higgins being my wide receiver 1. I liked the thought of Jalen Waddle being my wide receiver 1, and I also like the idea of Devontae Smith being my wide receiver number 1. He's probably the only other guy besides Waddle that I feel comfortable in that role. I mean, especially at the end of the year, this guy was getting peppered by targets. I'm looking here. This guy had 8 or more targets in the last 9 weeks of the regular season. And, these are good targets. These are, down the field targets. This guy's really explosive. And having a guy like Brown to kind of take some of the coverage away from you, I think that, but again, there's room for them both. It's crazy. 100%. We're talking about one of the more run-heavy offenses in the league, but I think there's room for them both and the run game to be successful, because this is just such a good team and such a good offense. But I like both of these guys. I like both of these guys at where they're going to.
Yeah, you want to talk about, talent and opportunity. I believe that's what our boy Matthew Berry has highlighted forever. It's not a novel concept, but it's one that he emphasizes. Talent and opportunity. Devonta Smith is an incredibly talented player, and the Eagles have one of the narrowest, target percentages in the league. It's A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith as far as the receivers go. Of course, Dallas Goedert's a factor at tight end, but then wide receiver 3 is Quez Watkins, who is going to have weeks because it's the Eagles. But he's not going to be a consistent factor. It's like Devonta Smith. If you can tell me I'm going to have a receiver who has performed incredibly well at the NFL level already, has a Heisman under his name, and is going to be on the field for 95% of the snaps, yeah, I'll take that on my team. And it's going to be a guy who's not maybe the sexiest name because he's a wide receiver too, and people are going to be like, oh, like I don't want. Take Devonta Smith. He's a damn good player. Like he's damn good. Do not be afraid if you miss out on AJ Brown and are looking for, some production in your wide receiver spot. He can be your wide receiver one, even though he is not the Eagles wide receiver one. I know I went against that previously, but it depends on the player. And I think Devonta Smith is a guy who, warrants that sort of praise.
Yeah, I think he's one of two guys in the whole league that warrant that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then at tight end, we do have Dallas Goedert. I can't say I was surprised at Goddard's ranking. I mean, he's tight end 6. He's above guys he should be above, no question. Darren Waller, Evan Engram, David Njoku. Dallas Goedert might also be a tier break. It is wild to me to see him behind Kyle Pitts. I hate bringing this man's name up, but that's where we're at. The ADP right
he's
now,
got all the upside.
Yeah, Kyle Pitts, ADP of 70.2, Dallas Goedert, 74.6. Pat, this almost... And look, maybe this will reflect in redraft leagues as well, but this almost feels like a best ball sort of. This is where you see the differences, right? Like of best ball and actual redraft rankings. Kyle Pitts is the upside guy, and so if you are not concerned about who you actually have to start at a position each week, it just retroactively gets filled in, which is what best ball does. Kyle Pitts, sure, maybe you draft him, and then you draft a guy like Schultz or Higbee or something later. And on the week, if Pitts does do the same shit he did last year where he has horrible weeks, but maybe can mix in some of the boom weeks, you've got a good combo there. But if you are actually looking for a good tight end that you feel definitely good about starting week in and week out, Goddard's that guy over Pitts. So I think he's a guy who should be at least tight end 5 for me, top 5 guy behind Kelsey, Andrews, Hawk, and then honestly, toss up between Kittle and Goddard. I think that's a valid question mark. Kittle's a much more talented player, but it's just the fantasy consistency hasn't been there.
I like Kittle considerably better than Goddard.
Really?
Because, we talked about how great of an offense this is and how there's a lot to go around, but at the end of the day, he's the number 3 target, and then they're going to run the ball a lot. And, I think he's really safe. That's a really safe pick. But I think as we talked about in past weeks, I think you could get guys who are safe, granted a little bit of a lower floor, 30 picks later. You know what? Goddard's ADP right now. Goddard's ADP is, 73. That's or 74. That's early 7th round. You're looking at guys we've talked about like Evan Engram, David Njoku, Pat Freiermuth, who are going almost 30 whole picks later, and it's like I would rather wait and take a guy like that than take a guy like Goddard in the 7th round.
Yeah, and it's funny. There's such different players, Pat, because Kittle is a guy who I just can remember disappearing at so many points last year, and a lot of people blame it on him being such a good blocker, which is fair. He ends up blocking on a lot of plays.
It's fair.
So, he's such a talented player. He's much more talented, receiver and run after the catch guy than Dallas Goedert is. But you also look at his game logs, and I mean, there were a lot of touchdowns here peppered in, especially at the end when he was playing with Brock Purdy. But I'm counting for let's go by games under 30 receiving yards for Kittle. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games under 30 yards. You look at Dallas Goedert in the regular season, 1, 2, 3. That's it. So you want the guy that's going to get you the yards and consistently get you, especially if you're in PPR, a good 10 or 12 points. And if he mixes in a touchdown, he's going to help you out quite a bit week to week. That's Dallas Goedert. If you want a guy who, maybe you're banking on this sort of end of season production continuing because it is going to be Brock Purdy, we think, to start the year, where Kittle, last 4 weeks of the regular season had 2 touchdowns,
incredible.
1 touchdown, and 2 touchdowns, even though the yardage wasn't great the final 2 weeks.
Getting good targets as well.
Yeah, it's upside versus safe, and that's just a matter of who you are. For me, at the tight end spot, I think I might go with the safe option with Dallas Goedert.
And the thing too is with we're talking about George Kittle in an NFC East preview, but I think that's all going to depend on who's the quarterback. I think a lot of the positive talk about Kittle has been the fact that he looked so good with Brock Purdy. So if it is Brock Purdy, then yes, all aboard. But if it's Trey Lance, again, as we'll talk about in the next few weeks, who the fuck knows what it's going to be like?
No one knows. No one knows.
So yeah, Goddard is definitely a safer option. And again, if you're looking, again, and I agree, kind of like a tier breaker. I almost feel like he's in a tier of his own.
Goddard,
a little bit here because no, he's in with Pitts. But yeah, like after that, like I see a little bit of a fall off. But like I said, I think I just like the value better with some of those guys going around the 9, 10, 11 spots.
Totally understand that. Let's move on to the Dallas Cowboys here, Pat. This is a team that, quite frankly, I'm staying mostly away from. We'll talk about.
Really?
Yeah, I am.
Really?
And look, Tony Pollard is the guy that I like from this team, but this team getting rid of Kellen Moore, and it's not the fact that I think Kellen Moore is some sort of, generational genius offensive mind. It is the fact that Mike McCarthy has this offensive philosophy that I think is just completely moronic, and I just don't really want a piece of that. And I feel like Dak already had a pretty down year last year, threw a lot of picks, not a lot of touchdowns comparatively to his better season, not running as much. Now McCarthy is saying that he wants to run the ball more, and he didn't like that Kellen Moore was lighting up the scoreboard last year or trying to. And I'm just like, where is the upside then for a guy like Dak, even for a guy like CeeDee Lamb, Pat? Like, I understand that the floor is still going to be there as the wide receiver 1 on a team that's still going to throw some, right? And he's such a talented guy. But this team added Brandon Cooks, is promising a slightly bigger role for Michael Gallup. I know they got rid of Dalton Schultz, but he's just, I don't know. I don't like the thought process, and it's scaring me off of some of their weapons in favor of other guys. Obviously, there's a limit to that. I'm not going to take T. Higgins over CeeDee Lamb, but like it's moving CeeDee Lamb and guys like that down my rankings review, especially Dak Prescott.
Yeah, and again, it's all about a Dak bounce back in terms of Lamb. But the way I see it is, I think he is so clear cut the number 1 target on that team. Obviously, Brandon Cooks is a very solid player, but I don't think he's going to eat terribly into that. But not only am I not staying away, I am all in on Tony Pollard.
Yes, like, Tony Pollard is a guy that I'm not staying away because he wants to run the ball. So
we had a viewer question a few weeks ago asking who we thought the most underrated running back in the league was, and I said Tony Pollard, and it's like, this guy's RB7 right now. Like, and I think even with that, I think he's still underrated. Like, I think that what he did last year with Zeke still in the picture was unbelievable. And now the fact that Zeke is gone, he's going to get those red zone touches. He's going to catch the ball a ton out of that backfield as well. Like, he's just an electric player who I really think we are going to see his ceiling this year. And, it's hard because I was looking at him like, oh, man, I think this is a guy who could finish as a top 5 running back. But then it's like, okay, who's he going to finish ahead of that's ranked ahead of him? And I don't know. The answer to that is I don't know. But you're looking at Pollard, like his current ADP is 21. That is in the late second round. Like, he's almost the guy that I'd consider in the late first round. Like, I like him that much. And I think he is, it's hard to say because he broke out last year, but I think he's truly going to break out and be one of the tippity top running backs going on here. I'm not as excited about Lamb as I am him. I think Lamb is going to be a very reputable wide receiver 1, but again, it's all about what you're doing and what your team is at that point. And I think that these drafts are going to be so unpredictable that it's hard to formulate a strategy. But I do like Lamb, definitely more in on Lamb than you are.
Totally fair. I think Tony Pollard is a guy like this Cowboys team is one that we are kind of anxiously hoping does not add a running back, because it's like if this depth chart does look the way it does come week 1, I don't know how that ADP stays there. I don't know how that ADP doesn't crack like honestly 16 or 15, because RB1 in an offense that has still a good offensive line and blatantly wants to run the ball, like that is what McCarthy, to the team's detriment or not, doesn't matter. It will be to your fantasy team's benefit if you get the clear starting running back. I mean, Malik Davis is just not going to factor in all that much. So if they don't add a vet, be it Zeke on a shorter contract or whoever it may be, Tony Pollard is a guy.
And I'll be honest,
your RB1, you're happy.
I'm not even worried if they were to go get a guy like Zeke. Look what he did last year with Zeke more prominently in the picture. And obviously they felt like they were obligated to use Zeke a bit because of what they were paying him and what he had meant to the team. But now, like, if they got him on a cheap deal, he would vulture some for sure. But with what you're getting from Pollard, his explosiveness in the passing game, with more opportunities at the goal line, I don't even care. Bring Zeke back. Bring a vet in. But if it's Malik Davis and Deuce Vaughn and whoever, good Lord. Ronald Jones, good Lord.
Tony P should be a back-end first-rounder at the very least, if that's the case. I'm totally with you. As we move into the receivers and actually talk about them, Pat, my concern with them, with CeeDee Lamb mainly, because I think you can get some value with these other guys, even though the Cowboys apparently don't want to throw the ball. Brandon Cooks has been a 1,000-yard machine for years. Last year, he ended up with
several different teams.
Yeah, several different teams. Last year, he only ended up with 699, although he only played 13 games. Yeah. Prior to that, I mean, it's been 1,000 yards almost every season of his career outside of 2019 with the Rams and then his rookie season with the Saints. If this is a guy that you're penciling in for even 900 or 800 yards this year, he's not old, as much as you guys listening may think. He's 29 as we sit here right now.
That's fucking insane,
it feels like he should be 32 or 33 at the very least. Look, another 1,000-yard capable season is not out of the question for this guy. And you look at the Cowboys stats last year. CeeDee Lamb, their leading receiver, with 1,359 yards, 9 touchdowns. Their second leading receiver, yardage-wise, was Dalton Schultz with 577 yards. So if you're assuming that Cooks is going to come in, take that and then some, and then if they do implement Gallup a little more, and if they do scale back the passing overall a little bit, it makes me a little nervous for Lamb. Not that he's going to bust, I don't think that at all, but it's like it's a guy that I can just picture in my head weekly going like 6 catches for 70 yards, and he does that for a month straight, and you're like, why did I spend, what is it, an early second-round pick on him?
10.8, that's a late 10 first.
Oh, my. I forgot how juiced the receivers have gotten.
You do want a little bit, like, he definitely scares me as a late first-round pick in PPR drafts. Obviously, in standard for us, no way he's a first-round pick. But that's the thing, though, is if you're getting Lamb as more of a mid to late second-round pick, fantastic.
Sure.
Fantastic. But at that price in PPR, But I'm definitely more bullish on him than you are, just because even with Brandon Cooks, like, I think that he is the guy.
The talent is unmistakable, and I think sometimes that can get overlooked when you get into the weeds of the situation and the play calling, and you forget that, oh yeah, this guy's just really fucking good. I totally understand that as well, but I'm at a point where I'm a little bit, I might pick a guy like, I would probably pick a guy like Garrett Wilson, even though his situation has changed so much over the past year. But he's, clearly going to be on a team that's going to throw the ball a good amount. I might even take a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown in a PPR league over CeeDee Lamb. But it's just something to keep an eye on. I don't know how I feel about Brian Schottenheimer as the OC, with him basically just being McCarthy's puppet of wanting to run the ball a bunch. Tight end Pat, Jake Ferguson, tight end 29. No real thoughts on this. I mean,
nice dynasty guy, honestly.
Yeah,
talks have been good about him in OTAs, but if you're in a redraft league or even if you're in a best ball league, no.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be like stunned if we're talking at the end of the year where Jake Ferguson's kind of like one of those fringe guys where it's like he's at the top of your waiver wire list after every game, but you never pick him up. But definitely down the line, and the next few years or so, I think he can emerge as the next solid Dallas tight end. But this year,
Yeah, with the Cowboys adding another actual receiver in Brandon Cooks, I expect the production to just go to him and for them to be a little less tight end focused than they have been. But look, Jake Ferguson, he's a guy that I have talked up on prior shows, a guy whose talent I do like, and I think he will pop up here in flashes over the season. Just going to be a guy who's hard to rely on for fantasy football purposes. The New York Giants, Pat, a team
gross.
I know, but a team that in general I am a little more bullish on than the Cowboys, but they don't have the weapons I think that the Cowboys have. So we'll start with Daniel Jones, QB 14. We kind of touched on it last week about who was it, because Kirk Cousins was ahead of him.
Yes.
How Daniel Jones is a little bit disrespected in these leagues. I think Daniel Jones is a guy who I am not a believer that he deserves the money he got. I am not a believer that he will be anything above an average NFL quarterback, but he doesn't need to be to contribute for your fantasy
That's exactly what I was about to say. He does not need to be.
Yeah, he can run the ball, and I think, people are going to continue to, maybe not think he can run the ball as well as he actually can, potentially because he just looks really doofy while he does it. But this is a guy that can add a lot of value. White can add a lot of value with his legs. And look, not a guy that you're going to be drafting as your starter unless you just love playing with fire, but a guy, if you are going the 2 quarterback route, if you wait, that is totally a guy you can start depending on the matchup and could probably rack up some rushing yards for you. Don't mind DJ as a fantasy guy at all. And then, thoughts on DJ, Pat?
No, basically the same. Just that, I'm not drafting him as a starter. I think 14 is a very fair spot, but you're not getting that kind of rushing upside at that point. After Anthony Richardson, until you get down to the really low end of starting quarterbacks, you're not going to get any kind of rushing upside.
Yeah, there's
and again, in an offense that was much improved last year under Brian Dable. So
yes.
So yeah, Jones is a guy that a solid guy that is definitely going to help your team at some point. But I'm not jumping off the page at him.
Yes, Brian Daboll and Mike Kafka definitely cooked up some magic last year. Another guy they cooked up some magic for was Saquon Barkley. And Pat, I'm just going to come out and say it.
I'm jumping off the page for him.
Saquon Barkley is my favorite player in fantasy football coming into this year. Like, Saquon Barkley is a guy that I would, no question, take rankings away. Pretend you haven't seen any rankings this year. Why should Saquon Barkley not be considered for a number 1 overall pick if he signs that franchise tag? Is there a good reason? He is a workhorse back with Matt Breida behind him in his prime on an offense that showed that they can be very creative under Mike Kafka. Like, if you're looking for a safe running back, I think Saquon's the guy. I don't see any. I have no qualms with him whatsoever.
Health.
I guess so, but like these top running backs, that's a concern for Christian McCaffrey. Everyone was worried about health last year.
Really,
Eckler, for the longest time, people said he was too fragile.
Yeah, Eckler, honestly, Eckler's really the only guy up top that really hasn't had any kind of significant injury history. But Saquon and McCaffrey, for that matter, proved everyone wrong last year, and we're healthy the whole year. And especially Saquon was phenomenal last year. Even with, we'll talk about the fucking gaggle of wide receivers they have in a second, but even with all that, he is still, without a doubt, the focal point of the offense. And should he stay healthy, oh my God, yeah. He's a guy that should be a top 3 minimum.
Yeah, and I'm looking at Underdog, and he's behind, Jonathan Taylor, who I am expecting a bounce back from, but I much prefer Saquon to Jonathan Taylor. Nick Chubb, a guy who I love talent-wise, but again, fantasy-wise, prefer Saquon Barkley. Yeah. Bijan Robinson, I prefer Saquon Barkley.
Absolutely. Oh my God.
And then you get to Eckler and McCaffrey.
We'll get to Bijan in a few weeks, but yeah. Honestly, the only person I would really, really comfortably say that I want Saquon over right now is Austin Eckler.
Yeah, and I can't explain why Saquon sits here as RB6 when he is, again, you said it perfectly, focal point of the offense. The guy who you are going into each and every week, without question, this is the guy they're going to get the most touches. I mean, he's the running back that may just be by default anyway, but this is the guy they're going to develop their game plan around every single week. What are we worried about here? Are we worried about Darren Waller making that big of a difference? I'm not. Like, it's going to change a little bit of the dynamic, I guess, but it's not going to do that much. Saquon Barkley is a guy who I genuinely believe should be considered for the number 1 overall pick, and I know there's going to be the hive mind that looks at rankings and doesn't see him anywhere near that and thinks I'm insane. I don't care. I would love to have Saquon no matter where I fall in our draft, and he's one of the reasons that I don't really care how this home run derby plays out, Pat, because I know that guys like Saquon and Tony Pollard are available here in later than they should be.
Yes.
And then his backup's Eric Gray. I don't have anything to say. Little look behind the curtain here. Whenever I do these, I just put like the top 2 running backs and then generally the top 3 receivers. Sometimes that second running back is irrelevant. I figured it would be Matt Breida, but it's not. It's Eric Gray, ranked RB 76 for Underdog right now.
Hey, Bran,
how
many wide receivers did you put for the Giants?
Yeah, okay. We'll talk about that. The Giants were the trend breaker here.
Oh my God!
I have no fucking idea how the Giants wide receiving core is going to shake out because, Pat, I think the Giants' best wide receiver is their lowest ranked one on Underdog. Sterling Shepard, yes, he's had a bajillion injuries. You can't count on him to stay healthy. I understand that. But the videos I've seen, and not to fall into the, it's the off-season camp video, just get completely have these biased takes because you saw one clip of a guy. But Sterling Shepard looks like he's running at full speed. If he is back to full health again to start the year, and you want a piece of the Giants offense, I don't know why you don't take him as wide receiver 110, given what he was doing at the start of last year, which he was fairly productive. Let me pull up the exact number. I mean, they weren't blow you away numbers, but it was
I'll tell you, though, that he had 24 targets in 3 games, which is substantial. That's more than substantial.
Exactly. So if we're talking a PPR league, so these were his numbers in the first 3 weeks. Week 1, it was 2 catches for 71 yards and a touchdown, 6 catches for 34 yards. That's obviously not going to do a lot for you, but again, PPR 6 catches, you're getting something. And
almost
then
5
catches
points for wide receiver 110. That's not bad at all.
Yeah, exactly. And 5 catches for 49 yards. A guy who got 4 targets and then 10 targets and 10 targets. Look, is he going to immediately earn those targets back again? Maybe not. They did bring in Paris Campbell. They did draft Jalen Hyatt. But at the same time, he is one of their probably their most experienced player at this point. I just don't understand why he'd be so low if he is truly fully healthy. And yes, to answer everyone's question of how many receivers did I put here, because I just don't know how they're going to break. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 receivers. I usually keep it to 3.
And you're not stretching either.
No, exactly. I keep it to 3 because I can usually identify which ones are likely to be fantasy relevant. The Giants, I was like, I have no fucking clue. Like,
I would say right now, obviously, Underdog has Isaiah Hodgins is their number 1, and I think that's probably fair right now because, he looked really solid, but at the end of the day, Slayton was out, Shepard was out. Like, they,
right.
They needed to go diving deep into their depth chart.
Isaiah Hodgins could be Travis Fulgham. He could be Travis Fulgham.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah, but you look at, like Richie James was like second in the team on their team in receiving last year too. Like, it was ugly there, but at the same time, it's like, if they really, really loved Isaiah Hodgins, do they go and get Paris Campbell? Do they draft Jalen Hyatt? But also, that's probably also Shepard and Slayton insurance. And Slayton's another guy similar to Shepard, where it's like, if he's healthy, wide receiver 84, that's good value. But again, you're just throwing darts at this point in the draft. Like, I have no fucking idea what to expect. And Wan'Dale Robinson looked really good last year too when he was playing as well. Granted, he only played. I think he only played in like 5 games. Yeah, he only played in 5 games, but, he was averaging, 5 targets a game in that span. And he's another guy, a really gadget guy that, as we saw in Dable and Kafka's offense, they like to mess around a little bit, and he could be a guy to mess around. It's just a mess. I mean, Paris Campbell kind of blows. Like, he's always been a guy where it's like, and then he had that 2-week stretch where Matt Ryan was like spoon-feeding him the ball for whatever reason. But besides that, he hasn't stayed healthy, and he hasn't shown anything. It's a decent real-life football signing, like, for all of them to have all these options. But I'm not worried about Paris Campbell. And for fantasy, this whole thing is just a fucking mess.
And it's extra gross, Pat, because I did joke about, Darren Waller changing things for Saquon, which I don't really believe he will, but he's going to change things for these wide receivers. Last year, Daniel Bellinger was basically their, primary receiving tight end, I believe. And he
besides when his eye fell out.
He did not exceed 5 targets in any game. Darren Waller's a guy who's commanding at least 5 targets a game if they use him right. So you've got a tight end now who's going to be, I would think, the wide receiver 1 in that offense, more or less. And so how then do things fall around him? Like, I don't have enough faith in Daniel Jones as a passer or in this receiving group for anybody to emerge necessarily, where I'm going to probably spend a pick on any of these guys, to be honest with you. Like, yes, I talk up Shepard because wide receiver 110 I think is ridiculous for a guy who might be their wide receiver 1. But overall, like, I don't have any want to invest in the Giants receiving core at any value, really.
And unfortunately, as much as I love the guy's one of my favorite players in the whole league, I am completely out on Darren Waller for that reason.
Yeah, that's fair.
Granted, you think about it too, I think people overlook it because of the fact that, he kind of bloomed so late. He's 30. Mm-hmm. He's 30 years old. And he's had a lot of injury problems the last few years, and he hasn't looked great in general anyway in the games he's played. You can attribute that to injuries weighing him down or whatever you want to attribute it to. But the guy hasn't been great. And with all those options and tight end not being a focal point, and all those aforementioned guys like, Njoku and Freiermuth that you're going to get at a much better value, I am not taking Darren Waller at tight end 7 in round 7. I'm not doing it.
Darren Waller has exceeded 80 receiving yards 3 times over the course of the last 2 seasons, and they were all in 2021. He did not do it last year. So this is not the guy, I think people have maybe sort of an attachment or a bias to like the production that he had that one grand spectacular year, but just that may not be who he is. So I looked at, again, all gross. Everyone Daniel Jones is throwing to, I'm sure as a whole, it will be okay. Like as a team, they'll be okay. I like the Giants. I like their offensive, their play calling, their philosophy, what have you. But I don't think for fantasy, this is going to be a place you really want to invest in it. And if somebody emerges on the waiver wire, great. Go get him later. The Washington Commanders, Pat. The only team I think so far that I've had to put 2 quarterbacks for, because there's at least reasonable doubt as to who's going to be the guy out there. I expect it to be Sam Howell because he's the younger guy, but A, the Commanders are weird. B, Jacoby Brissett has proven to be a decent player. So
Probably the best backup quarterback in the league, consistently.
exactly. So look, quarterback wise, we don't have to spend too much time on it, even speculating which one of them is going to start, because fantasy wise, you're probably not taking either one.
But obviously, it has implications. And,
Right, of course, exactly.
And the one thing that I've really liked about that is, every year, even with the Panthers, they're like, oh, Andy Dalton's a starter. Bryce Young's going to have to compete. Ron Rivera has left no doubt that Sam Howell is their quarterback. They haven't even said it like, oh, there will be a competition. We'll need to see this from Sam. They said no. That whole locker room is saying, no, we're going into the season with Sam Howell, which is great to show that kind of confidence for him. I don't know if it's warranted, but we'll see. But just that alone, more so, again, fantasy, the dude's not going to be relevant in terms of himself, but obviously for all of his weapons. But I just like that. It's almost just kind of general football. I just really like that Ron Rivera has just really invested in this guy.
Yes, and this is a team that offensively could look pretty different this year. So Eric Bieniemy coming in to be offensive coordinator and associate head coach, I believe. So look, he's going to have, by all accounts, all control over how this offense works.
Ron Rivera is a defensive coach, absolutely.
Yeah, so this is going to be Eric Bieniemy's offense, which for us fantasy folks basically means it's Eric Bieniemy's team. And we will see what that means for some of these guys. One guy who I am, starting to go with here as the hype train builds for the billionth time is Antonio Gibson. I think the maybe sort of a post. Yeah, we've got, a bit of a post-hype maybe sleeper here. Look, it's going to be his, fourth year in the league now. People have had these super high expectations because of all the Christian McCaffrey comparisons, and last year that definitely didn't transpire. He had 546 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns and 353 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns, but I believe at the end of the year, it started coming together a little, maybe not. But it's a guy that just with Eric Bieniemy now at the helm, people think is going to, perform a little more. And it's a guy, I just think the ADP has taken too much of a hit for a guy who's going to have as big of a role as he is. RB32 right now, an underdog.
He's going to be, in theory, he's Jerick McKinnon in that offense. And he's a way better receiver. The guy was a wide receiver in college. Like, I think this is a guy that you are picking strictly for his passing upside. And obviously he's going to get some carries as well. And because, unbelievable story. Like, have we seen a story like Brian Robinson? The dude fucking stunk in terms of efficiency. If it weren't for some of these touchdowns, the dude was one of the most inefficient runners. And again, maybe he'll be better in his second year, but I'm not in on Robinson at all, but I am completely in on Gibson, and especially in PPR formats, he's got much better upside.
Yeah, Brian Robinson, shout out to my guy, one of the guys that did kind of help keep my running backs afloat at the end of last year. It was him and Isaiah Pacheco, so a guy that Eric Bieniemy went from one and to the other. Robinson, you look at some of these carry totals, Pat. I can't even predict if they're gonna give him a workload like this off the bat and see if there's some improvement. But like at the end of the year, last 4 weeks of the season, 21 carries, then 12, and then 22, and then 24. I know those numbers don't necessarily jump off the page when you think of, okay, this was the RB1 on a team. Yeah, sure. But you're right, for how inefficient he was, that's a lot of carries to just be set, like you're just trying to get 1 or 2 yards at a time and see where it gets you. I don't love Brian Robinson either. Not a guy that I'm probably going to be taking just because of the presence of Gibson, just mitigates the upside so much. But Gibson is a guy, being ranked behind Zach Charbonnet and James Cook.
Come on.
James Cook, maybe we could have a conversation. Injured Javonte Williams, unsexy James Conner. There's an argument to have Gibson over some of these guys. And just with a new offensive mind, I think it could make some sense. RB32 is way too much of a dip.
And you look at how much they've liked Curtis Samuel there in the past. Curtis Samuel's out of his prime. If Gibson could also fall into the Curtis Samuel role too, or the J.D. McKissick role, like there's a lot of room for potential here with Antonio Gibson, and it feels more justified because we're not saying that like he's going to be some stud every down back with his receiving potential. Like no, like we're talking this guy almost specifically as a pass catcher with some rushing upside.
Absolutely. And Pat, these receivers, it's interesting to try and analyze these guys because Terry McLaurin is a guy that I feel like we've been expecting more from for years. Wide receiver 24 though. So, it's not like you have to spend a whole lot on the guy. Let me see who he's ranked around just to get a little perspective. So, he's ahead of Mike Williams, DJ Moore, Christian Kirk, Brandon Ayuk. behind free agent DeAndre Hopkins, behind Drake London. I'm curious, Pat, where do you land on Terry McLaurin as of right now?
It's funny because, like, I remember when I looked at that today, I was kind of just like, meh. I didn't really. And you look at the stats, and the stats are there. But, like, he's got to be, like, the most unsexy receiver in the league in terms of how he gets his production done. And granted, the QB play in Washington has not been good. And as we just said, it may not be good again this year. And, I mean, the guy's putting up numbers, but, like, for, a guy that you want to be your wide receiver 2 there, where I believe his ADP is going in the 4th or 5th round, it's like, I don't know, but I will say I love Jahan Dotson. That seems to be another very popular thing throughout the fantasy community is Jahan Dotson, because when he came back from injury, his depth per target was great. He was catching touchdowns, and especially his depth per target not being the biggest guy. Not necessarily being a guy that's going to go out and beat a cornerback and a jump ball, but still and again is really the clear cut. Number 2 target in that offense. You put Logan Thomas on this list for some reason, and then after that, De'Ami Brown, Curtis Samuel, who we just talked about too. Obviously, we just talked up Gibson, but besides those 3, I don't see anyone else really getting in on the party consistently.
I agree, and I think Dotson's a guy that I'm very interested in. But I'm honestly, Pat, trying to convince myself as to why, based on the numbers and the target distribution. Because you look and you've got it was last season, it was 120 targets for Terry McLaurin, 92 targets for Curtis Samuel. Both guys played all 17 games, and then Jahan Dotson, 12 games, 61 targets. But somehow led them in receiving touchdowns with 7. So it's just like, is this going to continue to be the guy that they're looking for in the red zone because he's just shifty in that way? And also Curtis Samuel's a guy that despite that target total, they really just fell off at the end of the year. This is a guy who's never been able to put together a fully productive season for one reason or another.
And it coincides perfectly with Dotson getting healthy. Obviously he had a few tough games getting reacclimated after the injury, but you could see when he started getting healthy, those Samuel numbers went down.
Yeah, I think there's a non-zero chance that Jahan Dotson is kind of this team's de facto wide receiver 1. So Terry McLaurin's a guy that I think we all want more from, but Jahan Dotson may be the guy that as wide receiver 39.
I'm still taking Terry over him, obviously, but
sure, of course,
I would not be surprised if it was a lot closer at the end of the year where these two finish.
Yeah, Terry is the safer bet, the guy who's going to be their actual wide receiver 1 to start the year. But it's like as things progress, Jahan Dotson may just be the better player at the NFL level. We'll see. Who knows? And Logan Thomas, Pat, tight end 34. Look. More dart throw. I think the noise around him right now is just that, yes, it's Eric Bieniemy, and who's been the best player for Eric Bieniemy for years? It's Travis Kelce. Well, Travis Kelce's Travis Kelce, and Logan Thomas
Kelce is one of
the
best tight ends ever. Logan Thomas was the starting quarterback at Virginia Tech 10 years ago.
Right. I'll say this: Logan Thomas has definitely had his years where he's been pretty solid. He was one of my championship teams. He was my tight end, and he was a consistent contributor. This was 2020, I think it was, where he had 670 yards and 6 touchdowns and on 110 targets. So for a tight end, that's damn good. But that is years ago. Look, you want to take him as a dart throw, like so many of these other guys that I'll say, feel free, just not a guy that I'm really projecting. They have some pretty good receivers on this team, plus Antonio Gibson, plus a quarterback question mark. So
let's just put it this way, is that I like Jake Ferguson a lot better than Logan Thomas.
Yeah.
If I had to take a dart throw one of these guys, it would be Jake Ferguson without a doubt.
And I think that is fair. All right, that's going to close it out for our NFC East fantasy football preview. We will be back next week with either the NFC West or the NFC South. Last 2 divisions
I can't wait
go.
for the NFC South preview because I know there's a guy that you're really going to enjoy talking about. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, totally going to enjoy that. I'm going to bash my head into my desk. We have some more business to take care of before we end the show. Pat, we've got our sports movies draft. Guys, again, not movie aficionados, but we are gonna draft.
We're gonna get fucking skewered.
We are gonna draft the best sports movies of all time, in our opinion, or just our evaluation of how iconic they are.
I don't even want to call them the best.
Are.
I'm just drafting sports movies, man.
We are drafting sports movies. End quote. All right. The first pick goes to you, Pat. I picked Sam Bowie in our NBA bus draft last week. By the way, Just to update everybody, Pat did technically win the poll last week of who had the best bust list. I think it may have been slightly misinterpreted. Some people were telling me that like Pat's team was better than mine, and I'm like, well, it's not about putting these guys in 5-on-5. It's about the list of who's or whatever. Pat won though, and it was honestly kind of a landslide. It was like 68% to like 32%. So shout out Pat winning the poll. But Pat,
I think we're both going to lose this one.
We're both going to lose this one. You have the first pick in the sports movies draft. What's the first pick?
I have the first pick, and I kind of teased Brandon about this. Is that like I haven't seen this movie, or as I said, any of these movies, which I think gives it away. Very fitting on the 4th of July, an American hero. I'm going Rocky with the first pick.
Okay, Rocky. Interesting. Not where I thought you were going to go, but that is fair. You did mention before the show, you're taking all of them. It's like the group of the Rocky movies, which is valid because, look, it's a franchise. I'm not going to go ahead and take Rocky 2 or 3. I don't know if they were good. Guys, I haven't seen Rocky. We're gonna.
I don't even know which one he beats Ivan Drago in, but like that's
we're going to start this off hot. I've never seen Rocky, so that's where we're at. I'm going to go the less. We're going to get rocked for this draft, and I'm excited. I'm going to go with a less, I guess, iconic movie, but it's still one that people generally agree is really good, and it's my favorite sports movie of all time. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. I'm going to go with Moneyball for my first pick. I think Moneyball is just a blast to watch every time you do. Yes, it's funny, the omissions that they had of, mentioning some of the better players that they had on that team at that time. They made it seem like an absolute just cast of bums.
Made it seem like it was just
not.
Scott Hatterberg was playing all 9 positions.
Exactly. But still a really, really good movie. Jonah Hill plays his part incredibly well. Love it every time.
I just remember just being absolutely fucking enthralled by that movie the first time I saw it in theaters. And especially with how baseball, obviously, like the A's, it never worked, but baseball has caught on to Moneyball, and you see that now, like on base percentage and basically like platoons, things of that nature. Getting guys on the cheap, looking for things like that. Pitchers who throw funny or have one specific pitch. Like, despite it never working, it revolutionized baseball, and the movie did a really good job of highlighting those parts of it. Yeah, I wasn't going to go with it that high, but again, there's just such for a baseball guy, just such a good fucking movie.
For sure. And Pat, your number 2
pick, I don't know what to do
if you please.
I'm going to alternate it because like I like funny movies. I'm more of a funny movie guy than that. And I think that the best sports comedy of all time is Happy Gilmore.
Okay. I mean, that's a good pick. Like Pat, I can't imagine we're going to get flamed too bad here, but granted, maybe
these are good movies. It's just the fact that we're going to miss some. We're going to
miss some, and there's going to be some egregious omissions. But Happy Gilmore is a good movie. Look, so far we've taken 2 out of these 3 movies I've seen, so that's a pretty good percentage.
Same,
Maybe I'll see Rocky eventually. Okay, with my second pick, I am going to go with one of the iconic movies, also a bit of a comedy, but I'm going to go with Space Jam 1. Space Jam 2 was so bad. Space Jam 2 was horrific, but Space Jam 1, awesome. Looney Tunes coming to the real world. I mean, what's not to like?
Another movie that's a bit more like style over substance, but iconic movie.
Hey man,
I don't
Bill
care
Murray,
if it
that
wasn't
plot
that good.
Is still great.
Iconic.
Bill Murray, also legendary UConn guy. So shout out Bill Murray, biggest UConn fan in the world.
Now Brandon teased a movie that he has an unpopular opinion, so I'm going to see if I can lure that out of him here. This was the first movie I thought of. This was the first one I put down.
Oh no, here it comes. This
MLB has leaned into it in recent years. I am going with Field of Dreams.
Okay, it's not about Field of Dreams.
Oh, okay.
I will reveal my hot take at the end if this movie goes undrafted, because it will be a little egregious if it does go undrafted by both of us. Field of Dreams, Pat, truthfully, not sure if I've seen it.
See, that's what I have. I have.
Yeah, so that may be enough of a hot take. It's not even a take; it's just a fact that I haven't seen it. But yeah, if I did, it was once when I was younger.
Just the idea of it. It was just so cool. Basically, just like dead baseball players coming to this random cornfield and playing. Just the lore of it. It's just, Yeah, just a really good movie.
Yeah, I remember.
And
when they were
iconic
like,
too. Probably one of the like I said when you said sports movies, this was the first one that popped into my head to put on my list.
And I remember when they were announcing that, there was going to be an MLB game there every year or once in a while or whatever it was. I was like, oh, that's really cool. I wish I saw the movie. So that's where I'm at on the situation. Okay, with my third pick, Pat, I'm going to go. Okay, Pat and I talked about this movie off camera, and I was unaware of the lack of critical acclaim for this movie.
Oh, no.
I'm going to pick the cult classic, apparently, The Benchwarmers.
Oh, no.
The Benchwarmers.
We're going to get fucking destroyed. They're going to take us off all the platforms. We're going to get Joe Rogan.
I mean, maybe we deserve it. The Benchwarmers was at least like subconsciously or partially the inspiration behind my username of Benchwarmer Brand. I mean, honestly, the username is because I wanted people to know I wasn't a former athlete and that this is a bench warmer making these takes so that people can't be like, oh, you've never played the sport. Your opinion's invalid. I'd be like, yeah, I told you that up front, idiot. But I also love the movie The Benchwarmers. I had no idea that this shit had a 13% on Rotten Tomatoes. Audience score of 64, which tells me that the movie is still pretty good. I don't care what these fuddy-duddies think who are sitting there with a magnifying glass. But look, Benchwarmers is... Watch The Benchwarmers and tell me you didn't enjoy yourself. I don't
that's the thing. Like that's the thing is like objectively speaking, it is not a good movie, but it's just so damn enjoyable. Like I watched it somewhat recently because a friend had never seen it, and I just laughed my ass off the whole time again.
Funny.
Like I was saying to Bran off camera that like if I had to, you see the tweets where it's like gun to your head and you have to recite a movie start to finish. I'm reciting Benchwarmers just. Just so many running jokes that have just stayed in my life, like beef stew. And I used to coach baseball. I had a kid named Richie. I'd call him Richie Bitchy. And, you bet you're still out. You're still fat. Scrimimage, athlete. That's amazing. Like this is stuff that is just stuck in my life so casually.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
casually. Like that's the only movie that I think I've ever like watched and then just immediately rewinded it and watched it again.
100%.
But I did not think it was going to get drafted. I was not going to pick it, despite my love for it. I was not going to pick it.
It's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Oh, boy.
I couldn't let it go undrafted.
Okay. Jesus. All right. I'm going to go back to comedies. And I am... You think it's weird that you'd have two golf movies in one. But obviously, a bit of an older, the OG golf comedy classic, give me Caddyshack.
Yes. More Bill Murray.
Bill Murray, UConn love now. We love Bill Murray now. Rodney Dangerfield was, everyone talks about Bill Murray. Rodney Dangerfield was fucking incredible in that movie. Same thing with like, if you play golf, you have quoted Caddyshack to some extent. You have done something from Caddyshack. Just it's a movie that's aged reasonably well too. Like a lot of movies. Comedies from 30, 40 years ago have not aged well, but that's one that's like you don't cringe that much when you're watching it too, so bonus points
for sure. Okay,
we getting skewered. Is anybody watching this skewering us right now? No,
not live. I'm sure there will be some feedback, especially when I will make a video out of this one because this draft needs to be seen.
And the bench, I had a pretty good reaction, and that bench was no.
Yeah. Okay, I'm between a couple here because I know what I'm doing with my last pick because I'm gonna rile some people up. But with this pick, I'm between a movie that is actually fully serious and a movie that's a comedy but serious. I'm going to go with the serious one because I saw it recently. It's known as sort of an iconic one. I'm going to go with Coach Carter. Samuel L. Jackson, basketball movie. Saw it for the first time recently. Yes, I'm trying to culture myself with movies a little more. And so that was one of the ones I've seen recently. And I also didn't realize that it was the movie that sort of originated the post-credit scene of like showing what, not post-credit scene, like the outro scene of showing what everyone on the team went on to do with that R&B song. I can't remember the name of it, but it went around on TikTok for a while too, where it's like Jimmy got addicted to coke and then died 4 years later. So that whole thing, but that I didn't realize once that scene came out, I was like, oh, it was actually in a movie. So it was from Coach Carter, but the overall plot of Coach Carter was super engaging. Love Samuel L. Jackson, and I guess I'll get one more. Look, Moneyball's a serious movie, but I guess I'll get another one on here for a little bit of balance. Go with Coach Carter.
Yeah, as I always do, I got to run through here. There are some real iconic movies that are probably going to go undrafted here. Karate Kid, Bull Durham, 8 Men Out. Just classics, absolute classics. Major League, The Rookie, A League of Their Own, another fantastic movie. This is probably my second favorite movie, or I'm not picking it, but it's my first cut, and it breaks my heart to have to cut Dodgeball off this list because, again, just
same.
another just immensely quotable movie. Just a great cast of characters. But damn it, I have never made a NASCAR pick in this draft before, so I am rounding my draft out with Talladega Nights, The Ballad of Ricky Bobby. Same thing.
Was wondering.
Unfortunately, it set NASCAR back so far because it basically just painted the drivers and fan bases as a bunch of dumb rednecks, which, again, there is still a portion. But beside, the people that complain about that, it's just like, just enjoy the movie, man. Watch the movie and enjoy the movie. Again, just so quotable. If you're a NASCAR fan, you've quoted Ricky Bobby, and it's just, I couldn't leave it off here.
That's fair. All right. I'm trying to debate if I'm going to have two just very clip-worthy takes here in a second because I need to make my last pick, and I also need to give my take on a movie that did go undrafted. So.
Wait. I think I might know. know what that.
I'll talk about the undrafted movie first because I'm not picking it. The movie that's gone undrafted here among us both is Remember the Titans. I think Remember the Titans is incredibly overrated. Are you not a fan either?
No, I'm not.
Oh, thank God. Oh, it's not just me. Okay, so our
same thing with the
podcast is
Mighty
either gonna
Ducks.
get
Like
canceled-
very just cliche, cheesy. It's
Let me
never
see what-
done it for me.
Let me see what this got like on.
Wasn't
Rotten
even on my
Tomatoes as
list.
well. Wow, I'm shocked. Okay, Rotten Tomatoes. Remember the Titans? Yeah, 72% tomato meter, 93% audience score. So this was. I'm right about that. This is a very well liked and highly touted movie. My issue with it, Pat, and I said this. So full disclosure, I saw Remember the Titans for the first time a few months ago because I was like, why have I never seen this movie? I thought it moved too fast because that football team and town was basically like, we hate black people, and then immediately they were like, never mind. And like it was just really, really fast, and I was like, there was so much animosity between like the merging of the teams at first, and then it just was gone. And I was like, that was rushed, and I don't like it. And I was like, I just wanted it to be fleshed out a little bit more. They went to like one practice and it was like everything's all good. It's like if you have this crazy like racist town, they're not just going to be unracist at the drop of a hat. So I don't know. That's maybe me. Maybe that's me wanting more backstory because I've watched shows
very
like,
fair criticism.
Yeah, I've watched shows like what is it? A show on Netflix that I've watched a bunch. Last Chance U. It's where they give so much backstory on like everybody, and obviously that is a documentary and whatever. So I mean, maybe that's why, but I don't know. It just Remember the Titans felt super rushed and cheesy as well, which you're right on there. Okay, with my last pick, I'm gonna take High School Musical. I defy you to tell me that that's not a sports movie. I defy you. That movie does not exist without Troy's ambition to be a basketball player, which then goes to an ambition to be in musicals. And it's
Brandon,
iconic.
You know what everyone's going to say.
What?
You've got to stick to the stuff you know. We've done probably like, 10 of these drafts by now? I have never been more blindsided. Blindside, nice movie. I have never been more blindsided by a pick than that. Than that one right there. Even High School Musical 2, they're playing baseball like this. Swing, bada, bada, hey. Oh, copyright, sorry.
I know. It can get us in trouble.
It's just inherently... Oh, my God.
It's a sports movie. I don't know what you want from me.
Like, Get Your Head in the Game might be the best song in the movie.
Exactly.
So, like... Oh my God!
And it's one of the movies that take sports out of it for a second, but it's a movie that for our generation defined it. Like High School Musical was iconic. So what did I do here? I took an iconic movie.
Oh, Bran, you're getting shit on the YouTube on the live stream.
What's wrong with High School Musical?
Nate said Pat wins because this isn't a sports movie.
I mean,
FPS Gandhi says Bran needs to stick to the status quo. Yes, he does.
Go watch High School Musical. Remove all the basketball scenes from High School Musical and tell me if it makes any sense. There you go. That's all I'm going to say. We had a lot of good movies go undrafted here as well. I mean, I loved 42, one of my favorite movies.
Oh, yes.
The Blind Side. Honestly, Pat, those were the only... Oh, the one that I almost took instead of Coach Carter, The Longest Yard. Love
was about to shout. I forgot to shout that out. The original and the Adam Sandler one.
Yes,
Just a really
I love
fun
the
movie.
Adam Sandler one. Such a good... And also has a bunch of wrestler cameos that I appreciate. I believe we had Stone
Oh,
Cold Steve
that's the
Austin,
thing that-
Goldberg, Kevin Nash.
You shit on Adam Sandler as much, but the cameos and like Nelly, Terry Crews, Chris Rock played it, but like just Rob Schneider, party in the group hug in the showers. Former football players, Bill Romanowski as well. Like they had a.
Will you teach me to football? Yeah, I'll teach you to football. So yeah, Longest Yard, unfortunate omission, but yeah, there you have it, guys. What is the list here now? Pat has Rocky, Happy Gilmore, Field of Dreams, Caddyshack, and Talladega Nights. I have Moneyball, Space Jam, The Benchwarmers, Coach Carter, and High School Musical. Maybe the most unhinged group of movies, at least for me, that I could have put together.
I'm gonna vote for you in the poll. Like.
I just can't wait. I'm not going to say anything either. When I make the poll, I'm just going to show the movies, and I'm not going to fire in any disclaimer of like, well, fight me on it. I'm just going to put it in there and see what people say. I'm very excited. So, yes, High School Musical, certified sports movie. Guys, we will end the show, as always, with our viewer questions. This question coming from Zach P333. If you could pick one player to put on your team, who would it be and why? Pat, Zach did not specify the no quarterbacks part that I put here at the end, but I had to because as a Patriots fan and you as a Raiders fan, with quarterback being the most important position on the field,
Mahomes,
we were both taking Patrick Mahomes, and I knew that. So I just said no quarterbacks in general. What player would you take for your team out of anybody else who's not a quarterback to enhance the Las Vegas Raiders?
The first thought in my head was Justin Jefferson, but they have Devontae Adams. They don't really need him. So my answer is Travis Kelce, who I would consider the second most dominant non-quarterback.
That's fair. Okay. I'm trying to think from a Patriots perspective what we would need. I'm okay with Ramondre at running back. Could definitely use a receiver. But I think I'm going to go defensive, and I'm just going to go Micah Parsons and have him anchor that defense. Make the defense just completely elite. And again, do what we're already doing this year, which is rely on Bill O'Brien to make the offense competent, minus a super elite player. So I'm just going to take Micah Parsons, who has an argument for one of the best players for best player.
I thought of Parsons as well, but I got faith in the boy Max Crosby. So
understood. The pass rush for the Raiders, of all things, is not their weakness this upcoming year, at least on paper.
It's the only thing that's not a problem on defense.
Exactly. And then finally, who will win MVP this year? I know it's early. Pretty simple question. I feel like people are going to be able to splice together some MVP predictions from me over these shows and be like, Bran predicted like 7 different players to win MVP.
Like, remember that Magic Johnson tweet when he listed like dead ass 20 guys as his MVP candidates? Like, I fucking hope one of them wins.
Yeah, everyone in the stratosphere. I guess I don't want to go generic, so I'm not going to pick Patrick Mahomes. I'm not even going to pick like Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts. I'm going to pick screw it. Justin Herbert. I'm going to say Justin Herbert wins MVP. With Kellen Moore revitalizing him, they added another receiver. He's got good weapons. If Mike Williams and Keenan can stay healthy, and if Kellen Moore can put together a little bit more competent of an offensive flow, I think Herbert has the talent. At the very least, I think Herbert's going to have a big year and show people exactly who he is, because he has a lot of doubters right now because of the statistical lack, with people not realizing kind of the context around it.
Yeah. I'll go with the guy who has shown us what he's made of, but he's really going to be the guy this year. I'll go Joe Burrow.
Okay, yeah, fair. He's due eventually. He's due for both an MVP and a Super Bowl at some point, I would think. We'll see if this year ends up being the year. But that'll do it for us, guys. Please tune in next week despite our sports movie draft. I knew what we were getting into when we did that.
We're all in this together.
We're all in this together. High School Musical, greatest sports movie of all time. All right, guys, that'll do it for this week. For Pat Gustafson, I'm Brandon Carney. Have a great 4th, and if you're listening to this on the 5th, 6th, or 7th, have a great day regardless. We'll see you guys next week.
Two-time World